A decade or so ago, when I got burnt out, I was very much in a suffering mindset and very much always overthinking and worrying. And I decided that I wanted to make change in my life.
It's a new year, a new chapter, and for many of us, a new chance to shift even closer to who we were always meant to be. But before we talk about change, about goals, we need to start with something far deeper. Something that my first guest of 2026 dedicates herself to exploring these days. What does it truly mean to live a life of greatness?
In living a life of greatness is different for everybody, and that's what makes it so wonderful. When I rebuilt my life, one of the things I learned about was the quiet.
Because greatness, as Sarah teaches, isn't loud. Greatness is quieter. As a globally respected and recognized mindset coach, the host of acclaimed podcast A Life of Greatness, and the author of the transformative book Living a Life of Greatness, she spent over 7 years interviewing some of the world's most influential thinkers, from Matthew McConaughey to Mel Robbins, Deepak Chopra and Esther Perel. And her mission has been simple: to help people reconnect with who they really are and who they have the potential to become.
It does take a lot of courage to make change because it's easier to live in suffering and complain about things than it is to change your life.
And as we step into 2026, Sarah reminds us of one simple truth. In every moment, we walk through the world with one of two emotions.
The way that we move through the world is done through two emotions, and that would be love and fear.
This conversation is a powerful way to begin 2026. A reminder that the life we want will never be found in resolutions alone, but in the courage to choose ourselves, to choose alignment, to choose truth, to choose love over fear. So as we step into a new year together, let this episode be your anchor, your reset, your invitation to uncover the greatness already within you, and to walk into 2026 with clarity, intention, and an open heart. I'm Steve Hodgson. This is the Noise of Life podcast. Stepping out of the noise and helping us step into a new year and reminding us how to live a life of greatness is my guest this week, Sarah Grynberg. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to have you kickstart 2026 for us.
Amazing to be here. Thank you.
Now, Sarah, when you think of the noise of life, what does it mean to you?
When I think of the noise of life, I think about the outside world a lot and the demands that we get from day to day. It might be, emails coming through or arrangements that we might have or work tasks or news that we listen to most days. To me, that's the noise of the world. And I think that the noise of the world's always going to be there. But what I try and teach people is how to quiet that and by taking control of your inner world.
Yeah, great. And I look at it the same as well, as that life is noise. And, when we listen to ourselves, a lot of the time we've got to quieten that noise to actually tune into what we want, who we want to spend our time with and the environments we want to be in.
Exactly. I completely agree with that.
So talk to me about how you quiet the noise in your life.
Well, a big thing for me has always been meditation. I love meditation, have done it for over a decade now. I start most mornings doing some sort of meditation that allows my brain waves to slow down and allows me to start the day, very much. I like to do a heart-centered meditation. So I start the day feeling into my heart, which then in my eyes open life allows me to then be a lot happier, a lot more loving, and that's first thing in the day. So then when the emails come, and that noise that we were speaking about arrives, I'm already in that heart-centered place. Also just quietening my life through silence, of being able to go for a walk and not have any distractions, not listen to music or listen to a podcast or whatever it is I would normally do, making sure that I do spend time in the quiet. My life many years ago was anything but quiet. There was so much noise, and I worked in radio and I loved the noise. I thought I loved the noise. I would even when I had a shower, this is absolutely true. I got a special radio to play in the shower so I could listen to the news and at current affairs and whatever was going on whilst I was in the shower. It was waterproof. It was like there was not a moment that silence would come into my life. And like I said, I actually thought I enjoyed it, like, I loved it, always had the TV on, even in the background, always some sort of noise until I got completely burnt out. And then when I rebuilt my life, one of the things I learned about was the quiet. And so having that time in quiet, being able to meditate, as I mentioned, is a very important thing. And that's the way that I allow myself to have that time to quieten down, to be far more in solitude. And, really just spending time also just by yourself. Not long periods, but having periods of being by myself. I very much enjoy that as well.
Yeah, I just hung out at a soul degree retreat in a 14th century monastery north of Rome with Chris Robbins, and it was interesting. They couple of the nights they did a silent dinner, men's retreat, and the first night we were like chat, chat, chat. Second night silent, and it was interesting. It was so heavy, that silence, because what I learned is that we really just, especially as men, but as human beings, we try and fill the silence. We try and banter, joke, talk. And when the silence is there, it kind of makes you look within and feel all the feels.
I totally agree. And I think also what I've learned, and this only over the past couple of years, is, as a mindset coach and someone who's worked in personal development a long period of time, if people come to me with like problems or this and that, and I'd always try and fix them. And these aren't people that are like paid clients, these are like friends or family and that sort of thing. And I've learned now that I don't need to try and fix what it is that they're saying. Sometimes to just listen and say, I understand. I completely agree. That must be so hard. That is absolutely enough. And I really try to do more of that these days.
Because when we share our feelings and we share our thoughts, you always feel better. You feel lighter after that conversation. And sometimes that's all someone needs.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And I think it's very much dependent on the sort of person. Like I know for myself, because a lot of psychology does say exactly what you and I are talking about. Like you don't need to fix someone's problems. You can just sit and listen and that's enough. But I have to say, I know for myself, if I have an issue, I actually want the person to be able to help me work it through. So I will call a friend and I actually don't want them to say like, that's enough or like, I get it or whatever it is. Like I like to actually talk it through. So I think every person is different in that sense. But as we're saying that it's completely okay to just give them a hug, nod, agree with them and have those silent moments as well.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same, Sarah. I had a friend ring me the other day, and she was saying, "Oh, I just need to talk out some challenges with you." And I started calling her on some of the BS, and she's like, "Oh," and I went, "But this is why you called me." Because she's got some other friends that she talks to, and she's like, I said, "But you knew these answers. You knew what I was going to say." And she's like, "Yeah, I did. I just didn't want to hear those answers."
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said, she knew she was going to call you and what you were going to say because you've been friends for a long period of time. So, she really probably does want to hear that, as hard as it is, or it might go a little bit against what she, is thinking at the time. So, you know, different friends for different things.
Yeah, 100%. And I think these days, probably years ago as a real estate agent, I'd get feedback and I'd get hurt with this. And now I like reach in and I'm like, give me feedback. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me where I could improve, give me the real kind of feedback. Because I think that's where the growth sits. And it kind of, I suppose, quietens our ego a little bit as well, or our ego maybe kind of, rears its head a little bit, but we're allowed to quieten that a lot more.
Totally. And I think something important to note with that is like feedback through the right people.
Mm,
Because sometimes we're given feedback and it's not correct. And it's one person's opinion. And had we shifted the way that we were doing things for that one person, it would actually be a detriment. So I think the people that you trust, the people that maybe on the same wavelength as you, understand what it is that you're doing, and uh, maybe professionals within their field of what it is you're trying to achieve, and that you trust, and that don't show any jealousy or anything towards you as well. I think it's helpful to kind of note that as well.
yeah, perfectly. And also, taking feedback or taking advice from people that have walked the path and not people that are, just want to sit in the stands and kind of, shout the feedback to you.
Absolutely.
I had a guest one day and she said, you've got to get in the arena, right? Like you can't sit in the stands.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think when you're out there doing something that's a bit more public, you are putting yourself in that situation. So you're always going to have people potentially saying things to you, positive and negative. But we do know that the mind's bias goes towards the negative, and you remember the one negative comment as opposed to, the 50 positive ones. But you just have to be very careful about what you take in and make sure you don't let it, dull your light or anything like that.
Yeah. How have you managed feedback? Obviously, you've interviewed a number of guests, you've had a number of roles. How do you manage feedback?
I don't get it that much, to be honest with you. And I think that you can kind of gauge yourself a little bit, maybe how you went at a certain, if it was an event you're at or whatever it is that you're doing. I think I have enough confidence within myself to understand what it is I need to, at times, improve on, or what I'm really good at. So I think I'm pretty good. I don't like it, and again, this, can I tell you, barely ever happens. I don't really get feedback so often, but that's negative. I get a lot of positive feedback, which is good because it does like build your self-esteem. But as Olivia Newton-John said, you kind of stop listening to the positive and the negative, and
Mm,
it's all just kind of neutral. I think that, to what we were talking about earlier, I would make sure it was from someone that I trust, who actually understands what it is
mhm.
that I do and is good at it.
Yep.
And I don't think I've ever had anything negative come from anyone like that. It's been positive, which has been helpful. I suppose, it's been such a long time I've been doing podcasting now, but in my infancy of doing it, I got very positive feedback, which was very good because it built a lot of confidence within me. So I think there's something in that also to say that if you feel that you're listening to something, or that someone's doing a really good job, maybe you're working with them, is to really tell them how good they are and praise them. And I make sure that I do that often, because I know how important it was for me when I was starting out and building my confidence in a certain area.
Mm. And that's in life. I heard a radio interview yesterday and they were talking about how, bad reviews, but everyone's like, you know, you've got to give good reviews. Like if you get good service from a cafe or you get good service from a restaurant or anyone, make sure you tell them,
Mm.
like, because it lights their day up. Like I love, you go to a cafe, someone's bubbly, they make you a great coffee. You say, good morning. Oh, look, and I say to a lot of the younger generation as well, I'll say, you're going to go far, keep this energy up and you just see their whole, they just love it, right? Because they don't get it a lot. But we need to be building people up and especially the younger generations. And if they're showing work ethic and they're showing positivity and energy, then, we've got to support that.
I agree. I think we're very fast to kind of point out the negatives, but we're not as fast to point out the positives. And, as I said earlier, it's important, especially when someone's young, to be able to give them that confidence to keep on going if they've done a good job. It really is. And I know it's something we would have totally wanted when we were younger. So it's important to be very conscious about that. And when you do receive some good service, or have some sort of interaction with someone that is very positive to let them know.
Yeah, perfect. Sarah, as we head into a new year, everyone or people listening will be sitting there going, "Oh, I've made all these resolutions, the new year, new me." Have you made any New Year's resolutions that you'll head into 2026 with?
I think, they're probably the one always in the back of my mind, but it doesn't cease as always a New Year's resolution. It's just like a resolution that, again, I don't think I've quite hit the nail on the head with it, is probably to spend less time on devices. I think that's probably 90% of people listening right now would have a similar one. Um, so I think it's a great time, the new year, to have resolutions because, as you mentioned, new year, new person, but to also realize that we don't need the new year to start again. You know, there is a beautiful kind of like the Buddhist way of being is that we start again fresh every day. Every day is a time to begin again. The sun rises again, we begin a fresh day again. So if you feel that you've stuffed up or you've wanted to have some sort of resolution and you're
Mm.
week in, you've broken it, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. You can just start again because it's a new day. If you made a mistake the day before, again, that's okay. I think a lot of the time we're so hard on ourselves, and then we can be our worst enemy when it comes to resolutions or just life in general. But if we give ourselves the grace that we would give others, then it allows us to trip up at times. But when we're conscious about what it is that we want to achieve, have that in our mind and spend that new day starting again and working on it again. And if you do well for a week and then you slip up again, that's absolutely okay. You don't start off at ground zero where you came from. You're already in the momentum of that good resolution. So you just keep on keeping on with those sort of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a post one day and it was public service announcement. You can change on any other day than Monday. You don't have to wait till Monday, because everyone kind of goes, "Oh, I'm going to start the diet on Monday," or "I'm going to start exercising on Monday." And it's like, where does it say that Monday was the day you have to change?
It's so true. You can start anytime, any day, any month, any hour, just as long as you make the commitment to do it. And as I said, if you slip up, you start again.
Yeah. And I was reading an article and some research around New Year's resolutions, and it was 88% of people fail on their New Year's resolutions within 14 days.
88%. Jeez, that's massive.
That is crazy stat.
Yeah, that is actually a crazy, crazy stat. And again, we can't be so hard on ourselves. You're conscious that you know that you want to change something. That's the first step. And then the second step is just moving through with it, right? And again, one day you might be better at it. You might be really good for a month. You slip back. But sometimes it's like we slip back and we give up. But what
Mm.
I'm saying is don't give up because you've made it a slip up or a trip or whatever it is. Just keep on keeping on. It's absolutely okay.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of seminars and conferences over the years, and a lot of trainings and retreat weekends. And the key thing I've worked out, and I've said to people, even I ran a men's retreat recently, and I said, just choose one thing this weekend. Don't go home, writing all the notes, reading all the notes, and going, I've got to implement everything on Monday when I get back. I go, just pick one thing that you can do, and then master that. And once you've implemented that into your life, then add something else if you feel like it, and just have those little micro changes that over time, obviously,
Yes.
have such an impact in your life.
Yeah. And I think we don't realize with the micro changes, I've written a lot about it, that, they're micro at the start, but when you keep on with the micro changes for a period of time, be it 6 months to a year, those micro changes
Mm.
become massive changes. If it's, even just not eating certain foods for a period of time, you might think, oh, that's not going to do anything. Or it's like I'm starting at the gym just doing weights once a week or twice a week. And then you realize if you keep on keeping on with it, then that has huge changes over time. So I think we think if it's not big at the start, it's not worth it. but to understand that those small changes and those small habits that we decide that we're going to implement, meditation being another one. You might think I'm just going to do 10 minutes of meditation, 5 days a week or even every day. That after a year is a significant change in your brain, the way that your brain
Mm.
regulates itself. So it's just about keeping on with those small changes. And as we're saying to people, it doesn't have to be grand. Just the small changes, they're easier to digest, but we just keep on keeping on with them.
Yeah, and it's like the 1% and the 1 degree, right? Like, we've both heard the story around, if you jump in a boat and you or a plane and you kind of just adjust your direction 1 degree, like it changes your path, it changes your direction.
Absolutely. So there's a lot within that ability to just make a small change, but keep on keeping on with that small change.
What do you think the difference is between resolution and an intention?
Well, I think the intention is basically, what do I intend for whatever it is? Am I writing an email? What is my intention for the email? What do I want to achieve by this? That is a similar thing to an intention. My intention is to be kind, or my intention is, to talk to the best of my abilities when I'm on this conversation with you today. So then everyone that listens to it is able to take something away and be able to change their lives. That's what an intention is. As far as resolution, I mean, I haven't really thought about the idea of a resolution more so than the understanding of, a New Year's resolution, something that I'm going to change in my life. Um, so I think an intention is more so what it is and the reason why you want to do something, right?
Mm,
So I think an intention is basically putting out to your best abilities, um, as I said, the reason behind why it is that you want to do something.
yeah, and I find, I live much more intentionally now with things, and I always find that almost, going in and kind of whether it's meditation or a vision exercise, closing the eyes, connecting with the breath, and actually seeing yourself, feeling yourself achieve that. And I think it really helps connect that intention to where you wanna go rather than just having a throwaway comment or a throwaway goal that you're like, "I want this." Okay, okay, you wanna lose this much weight, but why? How do you wanna feel better? Do you wanna exercise more? Do you wanna compete in a marathon? Or what are you trying to achieve? And then connecting that to something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a why, like I always say to people when, they're writing down gratitude, for example, and their gratitude of what it is they are grateful for. There's one thing to write like, "I'm grateful for, my friend Sally." There's another thing to say, "I'm grateful for Sally." Why am I grateful for Sally? I'm grateful for Sally because she's always there when I'm sad, or she's always there to talk to, good times and bad times. When you add the why to anything, you then having this emotional attachment to it as well. So the why is actually almost the more prominent reason of why you would do
Mm,
any of these exercises. So I think that having that understanding of intention, asking your why is something that we don't talk enough about, but we should, because knowing what it is that you want to do is going to drive you to do it more than just, as you said, saying, I want to lose weight, or I'm going to go to the gym because everyone else is. But why do you really want to go to the gym? Having that understanding or having that knowledge behind what it is that it is, what it is that you then may want to do, that also gives you the ability to be able to do it better. Say, for example, meditation. If you go into meditation, but you have no idea what you're doing as far as like what it is that it does to the brain, what you'll get out of it, you're not going to meditate as well as if you have the understanding of what it's doing. Or, for example, you mentioned visualization. If you already got the idea of, okay, I'm going to go into this meditation, I'm going to, in my mind, visualize the things that I want to achieve, or visualize a certain, um, visualize and raise my energy so I feel a certain emotion, may it be love or something like that, that I haven't felt for a while, then you're going to do it a lot better than if you just went through the motions of listening to someone talking within a meditation, say it's guided. So having an understanding of what you're doing before you do it, and having an intention as far as why am I doing this, is going to lead you into a greater place.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've got to reset and check in with your goals along the way as well, because a lot of the people that I coach or I work with, sometimes, they'll say, "Oh, I really want to do this." Okay, cool. Yep. You know, and then it's like, do you? Because you've kind of been wanting to do it for 3 or 4 years, and a lot of the time they're connected to this goal, but their life has changed, their family's changed, their circumstances have changed. They've still got in their head they want to achieve this, but they actually don't. They've just got it. They've got it caught up. I had a friend that wanted to own a business, and he's like, "Oh, I want to own a business," and it took him about 5 or 6 years to get there. And then, I said, I caught up with him about 18 months after he bought the business, and I said, "Oh, you happy you achieved, like, how are you feeling?" And he's like, "I kind of worked out that the goal to buy a business probably was a few years ago and not now." And it had shifted because he hadn't checked in with himself and gone, "Actually, is this actually what I want for the moment and the presence and the kind of part of my life I'm at?" And it didn't actually align.
Yeah. It's funny that a friend of mine was saying to me the other day, I can't even remember what she was talking about. She was saying something, and she's like, "You should do this," or it was something, actually I remember now, it's an idea for, like, podcast. And she was saying, "It's good because I've seen, I don't know, someone she worked with do something similar and they achieved a lot." It was a little bit different to podcasting, but a similar field. And I just said to her, "I have no interest in that." Like, I could do that, but it does not light me up whatsoever. And why would I do something just because it might get me more downloads or whatever it is, when I'm not interested in it? So I think we also have to make sure that whatever we're doing, we do it with the right intention and it lights us up, because there's no point doing something because someone else told you to, or you think you're just doing it because you're going to make fast money from it, or whatever it is you want to achieve, because you're never going to find happiness within that. And then it probably won't even work out to the best of your abilities because you don't have that heart behind it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, like, I get drawn to things now. If it's conversations or reaching out to people, I get drawn to it. And it's not, um, if it doesn't align with me, if I don't feel it, I don't do it.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. It's like also, with the podcast, I suppose, um, sometimes, and the great thing is, obviously, uh, like, I own my own podcast. No one tells me who I have to have on. But when people suggest people is fine. But also when people push themselves onto you and you're like, I don't, it just doesn't align with me. And if I was to then make other people happy by doing those sort of interviews, then that just wouldn't work for me, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's very important to go with what lights you up and what aligns with your values and whatever it is that you want to achieve.
Yeah. And I think it's, I have the same. I have people reach out and send emails and say, "Oh, I want such and such to be on your podcast," or "I'd love to be on your podcast. And I've got this new book coming out," or whatever it is. And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's have a chat." But I need to work out what this alignment is going to be and whether it aligns with the podcast and the theme and, you know, what the kind of vision of the podcast is. Cause sometimes I get stuff and I go, that just like, you just want to be relevant. You just want to, like, kind of amplify your message, but it's not something that aligns with, what I want to put out there, I suppose, or what I want to be known for.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's all good. Talk to me about living a life of greatness.
So, I mean, living a life of greatness is different for everybody, and that's what makes it so wonderful. Obviously, in my book, Living a Life of Greatness, I go through the different pillars, which are meditation that we spoke about. There's quite a few different pillars. I talk about conscious awareness. I talk about forgiveness. I talk about intention that we've spoken a lot about within our conversation today. I talk a lot about having purpose. There are obviously a lot of different chapters that cover what it is that one, I believe, needs to live a great life. But I think one of the biggest things, and again, this is a chapter in the book, is making sure that you lead through love. Uh, I had an interesting conversation with a guy on my podcast the other day. I've interviewed him a few times before. His name's Gary Zukoc. And he says
Yep.
that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's fear. So we have love and
Mm.
fear, and in every moment, we choose which one we're going to walk through the world with. And it's interesting because I studied A Course in Miracles many, many years ago, and they talk to that similar idea of the way that we perceive the world or the way that we move through the world is done through two emotions, and that would be love and fear. And within that, we can get to the understanding of the laws of the universe, one of them being cause and effect, which what you put out comes straight back to you, which is also, we find that in biblical texts, what you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So it's not something, it is something that moves through the world. And we see it, like you put out negativity to the world, and I can promise you, you're going to have negativity thrown straight back at you. And that's the same goes with positive, as we mentioned earlier. If you're giving someone a compliment or you're telling them they did a great job, no one's going to turn around to you, I promise, and say, like, stuff you for telling me I did a great job. It's just not going to happen. They're going to turn
Mm.
around to you and say thank you or give you a big smile. You're gonna make the person's day, so it's easy to see those things happen in real time. But I do think it goes back to that idea of love and fear and trying to move through the world, in a more loving way. And I know, again, we all slip up. I have many a days where I do, and sometimes we're in situations where it can be so hard to give that. But knowing that and being conscious of it allows us to put more into the world as we move through the day rather than look at it through a more fearful lens.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage to live a life of greatness, to make change.
Yeah, it does. It does take a lot of courage to make change because it's easier to live in suffering and complain about things than it is to change your life. And I had that experience a decade or so ago when I got burnt out and I decided that I wanted to make change in my life. And, there's this quote, for change to occur, you need to change. And it sounds so simple, but it's actually can be quite challenging because people like to stay in their comfort zone. And I get it because I had stayed in one for majority of my life by that stage. And so I realized that I had to make huge change in my life. And that meant moving away from friends that probably weren't suited to me so much anymore and I wasn't suited to them, to change the way that I was thinking because I was very much in a suffering mindset and very much always overthinking and worrying. And we know that, worrying about something has never made the outcome any different. It only puts you in jail. So all those things I had to make the change. And making those changes means that you can't constantly have to be on. Like, I was constantly watching my mind to make sure that no thought went unwatched, and to make sure the negative thoughts, I was stopping them and changing them into positive feeling thoughts. If I was ruminating over something, testing it to see if it was true or not. All those sort of things take work. It's easier to have the untrained mind to go into suffering, to think the worst, and to be miserable. And it's interesting because we're like, why? Who would want that? But when it's easier to slip into that than do the opposite, then we do. So I knew that from that point of burnout that I didn't want to be like that anymore because I was suffering and I knew that I had more in me and I knew I wanted a better life for myself. And so I made the changes that I just mentioned. And, for however long since have been on this path. So change is hard, but I think that when we make the conscious effort to change, it really opens things up for us.
Yeah. It's pushing through that discomfort, and on the other side of discomfort is comfort.
Totally. And even, if I think something like keynote speaking, um, I don't think there is a person that starts speaking in public and it naturally they're just like, that was easy peasy. Everyone has nerves when they first start.
Yep.
Everyone feels like that maybe it's not something that
Mm.
they should do. And again, the more that you do anything, the better that you get at it, the more those nerves go away and it becomes extremely easy. And for a long period of time. I remember I started out years ago now doing keynote speaking. And at first, I had everything written down and I was shaking when I was going to give the speech. And I was just reading it from the piece of paper. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my hand is literally shaking so much. Like, if anyone sees this, it's just so embarrassing. And I was crap the first few times I did it. There's not one part of me that would think, oh, that was great. Like, it wasn't.
Mm.
But I kept on keeping on with it, and then I remember I actually got some beautiful advice from Yelena Dockage. I She is, like, a very, big in the keynote speaking world and obviously fabulous at it, and I
Mm.
said to her, "Yelena, like, what made you a great keynote speaker?" Because obviously her background is as a tennis player.
Yep.
And she said, the first time, Sarah, I had my notes out there and I had my notes for a long period of time. But then the next time you're telling stories and you know the stories better than anyone else. And I had been told that I needed to memorize everything. And so I was freaking out because I just couldn't memorize 45-minute speech. And she said, no, 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 that is completely incorrect. You just learn the gist of what it is you want to say. The slides will be able
Mhm.
to help you. Cut a long story short, that's what I went on to do, and I was unbelievable at it, and I have not looked back ever since, and it was so great to push through the fear and how uncomfortable it was at the beginning, and I made those changes, and, now keynote speaking is something I do a lot, so I think if you really want something, then you need to push through to be able to achieve it and for that change to occur.
I also think that, from a keynote speaking perspective, is if you're gonna be a keynote speaker, you're gonna be speaking about something you're passionate about that is your, kind of level of interest
Yeah.
and expertise, right? You're not gonna, they're not gonna say, "Oh, Sarah, come and do, whatever it is on something you don't know," right? So, like, a lot of the time, if you speak, and I've done the same thing on certain things, and I over script things and I go, "I've gotta remember this and I gotta remember that." But for me, I don't script anything now. I know that what's the intention of the keynote?
Mm.
What are the stories? Wh- what do I want people to leave? And I want to speak to people like that. And when you speak from the heart and you tell stories and you connect to that, they connect to you. And I think, in the keynote speaking world now, um, and I've seen a lot of keynote speakers, as I'm sure you have as well, but the ones that I remember are the ones that cry on stage or have tears or have emotion or something like that. Whereas sometimes you'll get people that are so scripted, they've gone through professional speaking schools and everything like that. And they get to a point that they probably should like just stop and have a bit of a moment, but they just skip straight through it because they're just scripting it and they've actually haven't connected to their own story and their own kind of feelings. And it loses a little bit of authenticity for me.
Mm. And then it's interesting because I was a producer for a long period of time in radio and podcasting. And so one part of my role was also to teach people how to interview. And what I would say, and you've seen me talk before, is
Mm.
that the way that you're able to get people in is through stories
Mm.
because people can relate to the stories that you're saying. They see a little bit of them within you. The stories have, usually like emotion or they're funny or whatever it is. And if you can draw people through stories, that's actually the thing they're going to remember. They're going to remember the story more than the stat.
Yep.
So, I know for my keynotes, I do a lot of stories. And then within the stories, I'll have statistics or research or whatever it is. But if you're just doing a keynote that is full research of full dry kind of statistics and facts, and there's no emotional string or story attached, people are going to be bored after a short period of time. They're not going to be able to relate. So the way that you get people in is through being able to relate to you. And that's been something um, that I have seen through my work for a very long period of time. Even the podcast is people are able to relate to the stories that I usually tell within the podcast. And sometimes, the person that I'm interviewing stories as well.
Yeah, perfect. Now, living a life of greatness, Sarah, like for me, I find that now sometimes it was harder for me as I was going through my mental health journey and switching from real estate agent and business owner and principal to, into the field that I'm in now, as a mental health first aid instructor and doing some coaching, wellness, men's retreats. The interesting thing for me going through that was I actually had to work out what I didn't want. And then that helped guide me to what I actually wanted.
Yeah. I think that's, so perfectly said. As I mentioned earlier, when I went through my own journey, I had to say that maybe there were some people in my life that I decided probably weren't good for my evolution, and equally, I was not good for their evolution, and consciously pulled away from them, which I know can be very challenging and hard. But for me, it allowed new people that were coming with me on the journey and were more probably had more interest in where I was like my life was evolving to. It allowed the door to be open for them to come in. So that was a big part for me too, deciding maybe that some people weren't right. And then obviously there were other things as well, as we talked about the mind and being able to shift the negative thoughts into more positive feeling thoughts, watching when I was ruminating and being able to address the rumination by saying, "Is it true? Is there anything I can do about it?" All those things that, I learned through psychology. But noticing what you don't want is also such an important thing, and that could be down to the bad habits that you might have, or the bad food that you're eating, or the way that you show up in the world. Noticing that to be able to make the change and being consciously aware, which is, one of the first chapters in my book. The reason I put it there is because if we're not conscious of our words, our actions, and our thoughts, then we can't make the change. And so if we're not conscious of the things in our life that we want to change, then we can't change them. So I think the conscious awareness piece is the biggest part of any
Mm,
transformation.
yeah, and being conscious is really being present, right? A lot of people, we just on autopilot, we're like a lot of people listening would be just it's like they're running along the life treadmill and they're just going day in, day out, week in, week out, just doing the same stuff. And they're actually not fully being present at certain things because they're maybe connected to devices or they're already thinking about the meeting on Monday or they're already thinking about things that are in the future and they're actually not thinking about the now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, because I work hard and I also love what it is, I have my own business, what it is that I do. I was always on and always kind of doing work, doesn't matter time of day or weekend. And then I realized that, especially the weekends, giving myself the idea that the weekends are not going to be, unless something's really urgent, or, maybe there's time during the week that I can't get to these things. So I have to make up for it. Um, Making sure that that was left for family and friends, because even if you love doing something, I think if you're working 24/7, then you're not giving yourself that time to rest. So being very conscious of what it is that I was doing to allow myself to be more present, because otherwise, as you said, we're not in the moment, we're on our phones looking at social media, or, head down in emails for periods of time, and we've missed our kids coming home from school or whatever it is, to be able to be present for people that really matter in our lives. So conscious awareness definitely is the biggest player, one of the biggest in making any change and living a great life.
I also think I connect being present to the concept of what if what you're doing now, whether it's, giving your child a hug or giving one of your parent a hug or saying goodbye. If it was the last time, how present would you be?
Yeah, I know. Obviously very present.
It's harder. It's easier to say than do, but
Yes,
you
yeah.
know,
And I do think about that, um, here or there, uh, and I think we just, you can't take anything for granted, right? We see how life can change in a split second. So, doing what we can in the present moment or when we're with our loved ones, um, is is really crucial to living a good life. You don't want to walk through the world with a lot of regrets or come to the end of your life wishing that it had been different. And it's interesting. I do a 5-minute short episode every Friday. I've done it for a very long period of time now, as you would know.
Sarah's thoughts. Yep.
Yeah, Sarah's Thoughts. They've had a few iterations. It was like the names have changed over the years, but the concept has basically stayed the same. And I did one, and it was the gift of the ordinary day. And I've been thinking about it a lot because it's the idea of the fact that the ordinary day, it can be sitting around the dinner table at nighttime and the children are squabbling and, there's mayhem going on, or you're walking down the street and you've got the beautiful summer sun on your face and you're looking around and the trees are all full of green leaves and the flowers are blooming and things are just so beautiful. And those are the ordinary days. Like, they're nothing outstanding has happened. You walk down your street every day, you have dinner with your family most nights. But again, going to that idea that I've spoken to a lot of palliative care workers, and when we get to the end of life, all we want again is the ordinary days. We're not sitting there thinking like about the time that you climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro or the meditation retreat that you went to. You're thinking about the time that you saw beauty in the world or the time that you had with your family that you might not think twice about because you do it every day. But there is so much beauty and that's why I called it the gift of the ordinary day, because we shouldn't take those moments for granted. So I think to be more conscious of that and to also think how lucky we are to have something like our health. And there's a beautiful Robin Sharma quote that says, "Health is the crown on the person's head that only the sick person can see." And I think about that a lot because it's the idea that we don't ever think about our health till it's not with us anymore. And the sick person will always admire how lucky the healthy person is. So, there's so much in this idea of being in the present moment and not needing it to be anything more than what it is. And that, yes, we can have goals and dreams, but we don't need to completely chase and chase and chase because we're never going to get there. Like, we never arrive. Right? We just keep on
Yep.
keeping on. And the whole idea is that it's about the journey because it can be a split second and something changes. And, we maybe don't have our life anymore or whatever it is. So to just find that beauty in the ordinary day, I
Hmm.
just think is completely exceptional.
And we all keep chasing it. It's interesting, obviously I met you at Soma, um, and Gary was hosting that. And it was interesting because a quote and a line out of one of your episodes when you were interviewing Gary, and it was something like, you know, more than you need will never be enough, right? I think is that the quote? I think that is, or something along those lines. But but it
Probably
was so
something that
but it
you
was
amazing thing. So it was probably something like that.
but when you think about that, you go, like there is like you buy the best new car today, a new one comes out next week, right? Like you're always going to be chasing, right? And it
Well,
just really
that idea, as I mentioned, of like you never will arrive. You never
no.
will arrive because once you like conquer a dream, you want the next thing. I remember for myself, I really wanted to do live shows, and I had that in my head for about a year, and then it was probably even less than a year, and I got my, like an opportunity to do one last year, and traveled with, a prominent name. And then I'd done a lot of live stuff before, but this was like my own thing for my podcast. And then I just got off a big tour that I had done for the podcast just, a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, they were amazing, but it's that feeling of like, meh, and um because you're there, you've arrived at the place that you wanted to be, but it's never enough, to your point. There's always then what's the next thing and what's the next thing. So we have to put less weight on it, what it is that we want to achieve, not saying that you shouldn't again have dreams or goals or whatever it is, but not making them be everything,
Yeah.
right? That's
And
important
and
thing.
celebrate. Right? And
Yeah.
celebrate, because a lot of the time, and I was talking at the men's retreat last weekend about this, around what happens is in life, we set goals or we set things we want to achieve. And before we've arrived at that achievement or that goal, we've set another goal. So by the time we hit that achievement or goal, we actually go, oh, we're already focused on the next goal or achievement. We haven't celebrated it. And then we kind of get to a point down the track where we go, why do I feel like I'm failing?
Mm. It's true. You need to take time to be able to have gratitude for what it is that you've achieved. I think that is a big thing. And sometimes we move so fast through the world that we don't do that. So I think that's definitely a very important point.
Yeah, perfect. Um, Sarah, heading into 2026 for people, if they're sitting there, they need to kind of, find that courage to start living a life of greatness and whatever that greatness is for them. What are some questions they should be asking themselves or could be asking themselves right now?
Well, I think the first thing is that what is it that maybe they want to achieve, or what new habits do they want to make, or maybe they just want to you know, move through the world differently. Even it can be as simple as just getting a piece of paper and like writing it down. And, we know that as soon as you write something down, it feels like it's more there than when it's in your head and then you forget what it was because a few days have passed. Writing it down makes it seem more real. And I'm not the biggest one into lists and stuff like that, but I really do think when it's making change in your life and you're beginning, then writing things down can be good, and having a few goals that you can see. And even if it's just to, like I said, to walk through the world as a happier person or a kinder person, those sort of things, when you've got the element of service within it, which is something nice for us to touch on, is going to make you happy as well. Because when we allow other people to live a great life through our actions, it lights us up. And it's, the one of the fastest ways to happiness is by doing something else for someone else. And so I think whatever it is that you might be wanting to change in your life, if it has an element of service attached to it, that's going to make you happier as well. So I think really just starting, as we said, start small, in living a life of greatness. Think of the things that you want to do within your life that are going to bring you joy. Write them down on a piece of paper, and then the reason behind why you want to do them. So what is your why behind whatever it is that you've written down, and what are the steps that you need to take to be able to implement that? Start out just doing that and then move through by trying to tick some off the list. And maybe it's just one thing that you've written, and that is wonderful. And being able to revisit that on a daily basis and seeing how well you did today. And as I said earlier, if you slipped up, that's completely okay. You give yourself the grace and you start again tomorrow.
Yeah, because no one's perfect, right?
No one is perfect. No one
And
is perfect.
we were talking about it earlier. You were talking about, we're talking about keynote speaking, but you know, don't judge your chapter one against someone's chapter 10. And it was interesting. Like, Gary V. He says if you want to see, like I'm one of the biggest content creators in the world, right? Like he's amazing, but he goes, go and watch my first episode, right? Like, and you go and watch his first episode of Wine Library TV or whatever it is, right? And even when I started getting into podcasting, I did the same thing, and I went, I'm going to go and search Tim Ferriss. I'm going to search, and I think Tim Ferriss, of his first 20 episodes, I think most of them are deleted. It's because like everyone starts somewhere, and what you know, just look at the life that you want to live and, live it to your greatness. And I
Yeah.
think,
And also to
um,
that point, like, just give it a go. No one is amazing when they first try something. I say this a lot to my mindset clients that I have. You got to be in it to win it, right? And no one is good when they first start. The best athletes in the world, they went unbelievable when they first started. What did they do? They practiced. And again, we were talking about, speaking. You practice and you practice and you practice. I say that to my kids the whole time. You're going to be good at something. You need to get out there and practice. Can't just rock up at the basketball court once a week and think you're going to be the next Michael Jordan. You've got to get out there and you've got to practice. The same with singing, the same with playing an instrument. I say to them, there's no point doing it if you're not practicing. You're not gonna get any better, and, I think if you have a will, you find a way, right? You just gotta make the will strong enough to keep on keeping on, and, if you have cheerleaders besides you, sometimes telling someone, getting them to kind of, help you, egg you on. If you don't have anyone like that, then be your own cheerleader. Make sure that you put time aside every day to get better and better with whatever it is that you wanna do. If it's meditation, no one starts meditation and they're amazing at it. I was terrible. But I really wanted to make change in my life. And it took me ages to find a meditation that suited me. I found some that I loved, and I was like a changed person. And I'm sure that no, I'm not sure. I know for sure, actually, that my mind was running wild, probably for the first few months of me doing
mm,
meditation. The more I did it, the less that happened. So, just gotta have the will of really wanting to do it, and, we don't want people to come to the work because they've had a burnout like me or tragedy within their life. The reason that, I wrote my book, Living the Life of Greatness, or I have my podcast, is so people don't need to wait till they're at rock bottom to be able to move forward. They can make the
yep,
change wherever they are in their life. It's just that, usually no one makes a change unless they're going through something bad, but
mm,
you don't need to have gone through something bad to make change in your life.
yeah. It was the whole reason that I started the podcast and why I still do the podcast because, someone listening now, if they just take one thing away from this episode, they can make a shift before they kind of hit that wall or, they hit that event in their life that is, sitting in a doctor's office and they're like, right, I've got some, and they get diagnosed with something, right? Like, make your change now.
Mm.
Like, shift that perspective right now.
Exactly, and even if it is something happens in your life, but understand conscious awareness, you change your thought patterns, you understand meditation and, you moving through the world as a kind person, and then something bad happens, you have the toolbox of things to be able to help you, and what I found for myself is, obviously, things are gonna happen in life that are good and that are bad. No one, doesn't matter how far along their path they are, is immune to having negative things happen. That's life. But when you have a toolbox of things to go into, the bounce back between something negative happening and the way that you move through life is very different to when you don't have it. So, for
Ugh.
example, back in the old days, something might happen, someone might have said a comment to me, or whatever it was, and it took me ages to get over it, and I'd stir about it in my mind. But now, if that happens, it might take a couple of minutes or hours, or, if it's something bigger, then a couple of days, but it's not what it used to be. So that's why it's so important to understand the concepts that we're talking about, because you can use them when you really need them.
Yeah, and I've learned that through mental health, and as a mental health first aid instructor is if we can get people if we can kind of help them get back and put some tools and strategies in, if they do hit a tough time again, they can bounce back quicker. And then when they hit it again, they bounce back even quicker because they know what makes them feel good. They know what gets them back on track.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sarah, I'm really appreciative of your time, as I know listeners will be as well, because there's been some great insights and great conversation today. For those that want to reach out to you and connect with you, I know there's a number of ways, but what's the best way?
Obviously, you can visit my website at sarahgrynberg.com, where the podcast is housed, and there's a contact form and all these other different bits and pieces. You can follow me on Instagram at Sarah Grynberg. If you want to watch videos from the podcast, you can go to YouTube where everything is up. Again, everything is under Sarah Grynberg. So you can find me wherever you type Sarah Grynberg into.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I am really appreciative of your time. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to interview you. And I wish you all the best in 2026 and beyond, and look forward to catching up again in person soon.
Steve, it's been lovely chatting to you. Thank you for your time today.